Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle Ruger-Morowski. I am the Associate Director of Partnerships at Parker Dewey, and I really appreciate you taking the time during what is typically a very busy time of year to learn more about our platform and our partnership options. A little bit of housekeeping. I am going to be keeping an eye on the chat throughout the webinar. So if you have questions, please feel free to pop those in there at any time they come into your brain. If I'm about to get to that section, I might hold off on addressing it for just a minute, but I'm usually pretty good at being able to answer in real time. If I do get behind, I promise I will catch up at the end of the webinar. To give you an idea of what to expect today, we're going to cover the basics. What is Parker Dewey? How does it work, both for students and employers? We're also going to cover how it works for partners who are typically the schools, so likely you all. Then we're going to talk about some of those different partnership options. And that's really what today is going to be all about. Before we do that first step, though, before digging into what Parker Dewey is, I want to take a very brief moment to talk about why Parker Dewey exists. And it's because we know there are a lot of challenges that students and recent graduates are facing as they're launching their careers. Before I joined the Parker Dewey team, I used to work in career services in higher education, and I saw students encountering problems like the ones you see on the screen. A lot of students aren't necessarily sure what they want to do. This is especially true often of first generation students. So they're looking for ways to explore and try things out that don't involve having to start with a long-term commitment. There are also students who struggle with a lack of time. Sometimes they have work and jobs they can't afford to quit. They have family care responsibilities. Sometimes it's that they're a student athlete and their schedule is packed with practices and training and games. Other students lack transportation, and some students just can't afford to take time on unpaid opportunities. So these are just some of the things we hear consistently from students that they're struggling with, even though they know they need to build experience. So we know at the same time that things aren't always going perfectly for the employers either. We hear employers that are saying, I want to be able to reach students earlier. They don't necessarily know who we are at a time when it allows them to make impactful decisions about their major or the ways they're building experience in the classroom. There are other folks where students do know who that company is, but they really don't understand the breadth of roles in the way that they might think they do. Then there are other companies who said students have no idea who we are at all. We're really struggling with getting candidates. So they are also struggling with an array of challenges, and Parker Dewey exists to help these folks connect, to help both audiences overcome these burdens, basically. So, how it helps students. The model creates accessible opportunities that help them overcome those barriers like lack of time, lack of transportation, wanting to try something without commitment. And we're going to get into those details here in a second. How it helps employers is that it allows the employers to access exactly that demographic and see or those demographics and see their skills in action. And what this does for employers is it allows them to make more informed hiring decisions. So when they're hiring for that traditional internship or their full-time role, they're not doing it just based on a resume or an interview or a GPA, which we know aren't actually the best indicators of fit a lot of the time. They're doing it based on a real performance of relevant skills or relationships they've built over the course of years because micro internships allowed them to engage talent earlier. So, how does this help all of you? Well, as our educational partners, present and potential, we know that oftentimes, pretty much all the time, your goal is to help your students make those connections, make their decisions about their careers in a way that's going to set them up for success, while also supporting the employers who are coming to you and asking, how can I reach that talent? So, we're here to help all of these parties do what they're already trying to do, but do it better. As promised, what exactly are these micro internships? Well, to put it very quickly, they are short-term paid professional projects. But to add a little bit more detail to what these are and what they involve, what we mean by projects is there is always a specific deliverable as opposed to ongoing responsibilities. A micro internship is never going to involve manning a front desk. It's never going to involve manning a phone line. It's never going to involve consistently taking care of anything that might come in. There is something specific that the micro intern is responsible for completing. And when they're done with that deliverable, they're done with the micro internship. And that means these are usually pretty short term. Most of the projects on our platform can be completed within 10 to 40 hours total, not per week, not per month, but in total. That combined with the fact that over 90% of our projects are remote means that they are seriously accessible to students who might not otherwise have time or transportation to engage in more traditional in-person opportunities. It's also really appealing to those students who are exploring because this allows them to do so, again, without having to start with a big commitment. Companies can post these at any time of year. They do not have to align with the academic calendar, and they do tend to move quickly. Most companies make micro-internship selections within a couple weeks of posting, if not more quickly. Another hallmark of our micro-internships is that they are always paid. So for students who can't afford to spend their time on something that's not paid, that's not an issue here. They're compensated for the time they spend, or rather for the completion of the micro-internship. Micro-interns don't need to formally track their hours. The rate is set when the micro-internship is posted. Now, how the payment gets to the micro intern is a little bit unique. So, with our platform, regardless of what company has posted the project or who the project is for, we, Parker Dewey, are the employer of record. So, how that works in practice. Employers can create their accounts and post their projects with no cost, no obligation. And what I mean by that is if they don't like the candidates, they close it. They don't owe anything. It's genuinely risk-free. But most of the time, by using Parker Dewey, these employers are finding candidates that they're excited about and they want to give a chance to and they want to work with. So when they select those micro interns, that's when the employer gets an invoice from Parker Dewey. The employer pays us and we take care of all that employer of record admin. So we're getting the micro intern's payroll information. We process the pay to the micro intern when the project is over. If the micro intern earns above the threshold, they will get a 1099 form from us come tax season. They are independent contractors on our books. 90% of what the employer has paid goes to the micro intern, and the 10% difference covers the cost of Parker Dewey acting as the employer of record. And it's set up this way because of that goal of micro internships for employers being used as a recruiting tool. This allows them to try out 5 or 10 micro interns to see who is actually the best fit for my longer term role without having to go through onboarding all of them just to see who's the right fit. It also makes things easier for students. They can try things with different companies without having to do onboarding paperwork at every one of them. And there's also a level of safety involved for students. If they want to do a project with a company they've never heard of before, they don't have to worry, is this a scam to try and get my payroll information? Because Parker Dewey are the only folks that need the information necessary to pay them. The projects always need to involve skills or knowledge that can realistically be aligned with what students are learning in degree programs, even if it's early in their college careers, first or second year students. That includes a wide breadth of industries and projects, but you won't see things like paint my fence or walk my dog. Nothing wrong with those things, just not really aligned with the intent of Parker Dewey, which is again to allow employers to access some of those demographics they might otherwise be missing, assess them in a real way, and allow everyone, the micro intern and the employer, to make more informed decisions about next steps for longer term roles, whether that be traditional internships or full time. I see we've had some more folks join us since the call kicked off, so I just want to draw your attention again to the chat. I'll say a little hello there. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to put them in as we're going along. Happy to answer in real time. I saw a hand real quick. If it's easier to ask your question out loud, we will be saving audible questions for the end, but questions can go in the chat at any time. So now that we've talked a little bit about what micro internships are, a common question, especially with how tight a lot of budgets are these days, is what does it cost? So I want to make it clear, when it comes to micro interns, and those are students and recent graduates, money only flows one way, and that is from Parker Dewey to the selected micro interns when they complete their micro internships. There is never any cost to create an account, never any cost to apply, never any cost to anything. And again, all opportunities are paid. For employers, they can create their accounts and post their projects. Again, no cost or obligation. If they don't like the candidates, they don't have to pick somebody. They can close it, and that means they owe nothing. They only receive an invoice from Parker Dewey once they have selected their micro interns. Now, the cost of a micro internship We recommend that the micro intern earn between $20 to $25 per estimated hour, and that's what they take home. So, in addition to the cost of the project, there's that 10% that covers the cost of Parker Dewey acting as the employer of record. Some of you may see in the slides that minimum $15 of estimated or $15 per estimated hour. We typically do not go below 20, depending on the part of the country the employer is in. And if they are only trying to engage local talent, that is the basement of where we will potentially go. But anything below $20 per estimated hour has to go through a special review. And if the employer says, wow, this micro intern was amazing, as they often do, we want to hire them for our traditional internship or a full-time role. There's no cost to that. There's no staffing fee, no success fee. We're not a recruiting firm. That's the intended goal of these micro internships. What they paid for the micro internship allows them to do that. Now, we are going to talk about partnership options a little bit later, and when we do, you'll see there are different options. It's very similar for employers. So, what I'm describing right now is kind of that basic employer option, and they can do as many projects as they like this way. It's the cost of the micro internship plus 10% to cover the cost of Parker Dewey being the employer of record. Now, if they want to use this more intentionally as a large scale recruiting tool, there are dashboards and other ways that we can support them, but they're not required. Again, they're welcome to do as many projects as they like ad hoc. So for you all, schools and nonprofits, as alluded to, we have three different partnership options, and that includes a basic one that is no cost. So we'll talk more about what is included in that coming forward. But if you walked in today's webinar going, I have no budget, is this something that I can use? The answer is yes, we do have a no cost option. So now that we've covered the upfront costs, which to you all is none if you start with basic, I want to talk a little bit about how it actually works and walk you through that student and employer experience. A reminder before we dig in, again, we, Parker Dewey, are the employer of record. We're the ones reviewing the projects to make sure there's a specific professional deliverable, that it can reasonably be completed in the estimated number of hours, and that the project is compensated appropriately. When the micro intern gets paid, pay will come from Parker Dewey, regardless of what company they're doing the project for. And we're also here to support both parties along the way. So with that context established, let's look at the actual platform. When students first create their account, they will be prompted to set up a profile. This is really similar to like a LinkedIn or a Handshake profile. And the more they make use of the different sections, the more it can positively impact their likelihood of selection. So things like adding a brief personal statement or highlighted experience can make a big difference. Now, for many students, a micro internship may be their first professional experience. So I always like to highlight that this doesn't need to be jobs or internships. This could be class, extracurricular, or volunteer projects. Anything they've done that demonstrates skills relevant to the projects they want to do on Parker Dewey can benefit them here. There's also an option for them to upload a resume, and we have seen a strong preference from employers for candidates who do so. So even though it's not required, it is highly recommended to be competitive. Now, once students have set up their profile, they'll be able to go to the dashboard, and this is where they'll see the opportunities. What they see will differ depending on a couple of different factors, but the most influential one is their institution. When companies post their projects, they have the ability to leave them open to all, in which case they would fall into this category. That means that all Parker Dewey users can see and apply to those opportunities. Or they have the ability to feature them to specific institutions. So they can decide that they only want one school or multiple schools to see their opportunity, but they don't want it to be open to all. We see that most employers choose to feature, and that has to do with their longer term goals. Even though the projects are typically remote, a lot of companies are using this to identify talent that could be a good fit, either for a traditional internship or a full-time role. So they'll often feature to schools that are in the locations their companies are, because that's the longer term goal. So just to show you the difference, I'm logged in right now as a school who has a program available to them. So they have a good number of featured micro internships, and they see those open to all underneath. If I change my educational institution, to a school that hasn't done much in the way recently of promoting this to employers, you'll see that those students are only going to see the open to all micro internships. Now, there are only a few here, and each of them, depending on their goals, could each be hiring 5 or 10 micro interns. But again, that's because most companies are featuring to specific schools. So at this point, you might be wondering, well, how do I get there to be more opportunities available to my students? What we have seen is that partners who share this with their employers consistently and emphasize that it's a recruiting tool that's going to help them expand their pipelines and make more informed hiring decisions for both internships and full-time roles. Those companies that already have an interest in your talent, the ones who come to the career fair, the ones who table on campus, the ones who come to you asking, how can I address some of these recruiting challenges I'm having? Those are the ones, since they're already interested in your talent, most likely to feature projects to your students. So that's why, in addition to the student experience today, we'll also be talking about the employer experience and resources that all partners get to engage both audiences. But focusing back on the student experience now, if they decide they're interested in a project based on the title, they can hit the drop down to learn more. So they'll see the project description. Over here on the left, they'll see when the project is hoping to begin. So this is when they're hoping to have selected a candidate by. They don't have to wait. So if they get a candidate they like today, they could make that selection today, but this is kind of the latest intended start date. Now, every once in a while, your students may see projects with the start date a couple days in the past. That means that's when the employer was hoping to kick off when they posted, but they may not have a candidate they like yet, so they're leaving it open just a couple days longer. All that to say, if a student can see the opportunity, even if the start date is a couple days in the past, it's worth their time to apply. They'll also see when the company is hoping the project will be completed and the estimated number of hours. Now, micro interns don't need to formally track their time. They're paid based on completion of the project, but we ask the employers to give us a ballpark when they're posting of how long this project will realistically take. That does a couple things. One, it allows us to look at the project and assess, can this realistically be completed in that amount of time? It also allows us to look at the payment and determine if that is appropriate for that micro internship. Now, as mentioned, most projects are remote, over 90% in fact, and they can see whether something is remote or on-site before even clicking in, but it's reiterated again here. If they only want to see opportunities that are entirely remote, they can also filter. And again, that's going to be most, but it allows them to see just those ones for who that is true. If they decide they'd like to apply, they'll hit the button and then they'll always have this question, why do you think we should select you? Employers cannot remove that one because we found the answers are often very telling. Now, some employers will leave that as the only question. Other employers, like this one, will ask a few additional questions. Now, these are not intended to be essays. 2 to 4 sentences can be really effective, especially if the student uses those 2 to 4 sentences to use something like the STAR method, where they describe a situation, a task, and an action and result related to the reason why they think that that employer should select them. There are also some yes or no questions down here, basically just trying to give us an idea of, was this company already on the student's radar? Were they already thinking of applying to other things with them? Often the answer is no, which really demonstrates that this is a great way for students to broaden their horizons and that they feel more comfortable doing so with micro internships because they are such short commitments. Now, when a student submits their application, what the employer is going to see is a combination of these upper responses. Again, they don't see these yes or no questions. They don't know if the student was already thinking about them. But they see these top responses and the information in the student's profile. That's automatically attached to every project the student applies for, so they don't have to put it in every time they want to apply for something, but they can update that profile at any time. Once they've submitted their application, they will know their status in the Applied tab. Anything under active, they're still being considered for. If it's moved to past, that's how they know they weren't selected for that particular opportunity. Now, only after they've submitted an application does the company they applied for have the ability to message them on the Parker Dewey platform. Now, most companies are using these micro internships as an interview of sorts. So they typically aren't going to put a student through an interview for the interview, if that makes sense. But if the project they're looking for does require strong interpersonal skills, at this point they could message them and request an interview to make sure that they do indeed have those skills. Again, most of the time, the employers are going to make a decision based off just two things: the information in that student's profile and their application responses. So that's why if you encourage your students to come to our regular student-facing webinars, we spend a lot of time coaching on how to make sure their profile and application responses are polished and making the best impression possible. Because most of the time with micro-internships, those are the only two things allowing the student to make any impression at all. Now, once they are selected for a micro-internship, they will be notified via email. They will get the contact information for the professional at the company and plenty of resources from Parker Dewey. So we're going to give them guidance and templates for how to set up a kickoff call with that professional so they get the chance to ask questions, get context, they're expanding their network. We also send them other resources to help them professionally keep in contact throughout the micro-internship. Some projects are really straightforward. After that first kickoff call, it might just be a few emails back and forth. If the project is a little bit more complex, they might have additional check-in meetings to talk about progress or anything that has come up and while working on the project. So in both cases, the micro-interns are covered. We have templated agendas and emails to help them reflect on what they've done, what they plan to do next, any questions they may have, and help them make sure expectations are aligned for the remainder of the project. We are also checking in with both parties along the way to see if there's anything that they need, if they're having any trouble connecting, basically just trying to make sure everyone has a positive experience. So that is the student experience of applying and getting selected. Some common questions that I usually get at this point. Again, folks, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. Happy to answer. But a common one is, can international students do this? And the answer is typically, but it depends on the school. They do need to have work authorization, and we have had students do this through CPT or pre-completion OPT, but every school has their own process. So our advice to international students is to check with international student support at their institution first to make sure they know what their school's process is and if there's any particular, barriers they need to be looking for. So, schools often have a minimum number of credit hours needed for credit if they're doing this through CPT. Those are the types of things international students should be aware of that are specific to their institution. Now, if they are able to do it, again, regardless of what company they're working with, we, Parker Dewey, are the employer of record. So that offer letter they need can be requested. It will come on Parker Dewey's letterhead. And since companies often do use this as a recruiting tool, there may be some companies who just aren't in a position to sponsor, so they may require that the candidate be a U.S. citizen. If that's the case, that's often going to be noted in the project description. So international students are also encouraged to make sure they are reading those descriptions carefully because we know time is valuable. Another population that often encounters struggles building experience are undocumented students. Since micro-interns are independent contractors of Parker Dewey, that means that undocumented students can do these as well, as long as they have a valid ITIN number. Now, I cannot emphasize enough that I am not a lawyer of any kind, nor should anything I ever say or imply be construed as legal advice, but I will share that I've heard from some folks that their immigration lawyers have advised them if they don't already have an ITN, now may not be the time to get one, but it's my understanding that most undocumented students do already have this number in place. So I want to talk now about some of the impacts of these micro-internships. When a student or recent graduate completes a micro-internship, they're asked to reflect on what, if any, impact do they feel this experience had on their career readiness. Now, for each of these competencies, and we use the NACE career readiness competencies for this question, they can indicate, didn't make a difference, the smallest light blue bar on each of these competencies. Or they can say, I don't feel like I'm any more confident, or not confident, they are more confident. I don't feel like my level of proficiency has changed, but I am more confident. That's a slightly darker blue bar. Or they can indicate improvement, either a little or a lot. And as you can see from the last time we ran the full report, these are really positively impactful experiences, even though they're short ones. If you're interested in perusing that report while we complete the rest of the webinar, please don't hesitate. That link is in the chat. So, kind of to put a button on the student experience, these are those same students that I showed at the beginning of the webinar who had quotes about how they couldn't afford to spend time on something unpaid, or they weren't sure where to start building relationships, or they were looking for accessible ways to explore, or they were struggling with a lack of time or transportation. And you can read their quotes about how Parker Dewey Micro-Internships helped them overcome those challenges to start building experience. If you'd like to hear some other student testaments, or rather read, I don't know why I said hear, here are some student success stories. In this bunch, we have folks from small schools, big schools, research schools, liberal arts schools. We have folks who are liberal arts majors, folks who are more industry specific, like engineering or those types of things. So lots of different ways where you can see how students have used these to build experience and in many cases lead on to something longer term. So switching now to that employer experience. A reminder again that the employers get to engage these students, but they don't have any of that burden of acting as the employer of record. We're taking all of that on. So I want to show you now just how easy it also is for them to post opportunities. So I'm going to go ahead and switch my account here. I'm going to log in as an employer. Again, they can create this account without any cost or any obligation. When they set up their profile, it's super simple. They're just going to put in some details about their company, so that gets attached to any projects that they post. Now, when they go to actually post opportunities, we have things again to make this crazy easy. They can draft a custom project. If they already have something in mind, they are ready to go. This is going to be the option for them. But let's say you have an employer that doesn't have a project idea, but they have a recruiting goal. So maybe they want to hire for an entry-level marketing role. That's where this project builder comes in. With this builder, they can put in a prompt. So for example, I could say, I need a project that will help me assess if someone's the right fit for an entry-level marketing role. I could even say, I need a project that will help me assess if somebody is the right fit for the attached role, and I can upload a job description. The project builder is going to create a project for me that is going to get me the insights I need. Another option is if employers want to browse projects that we've seen posted in the past related to different creative or finance or human resources areas. Basically, just different options based on industries. So let's say I decide I want a micro intern to look at a process, see if they can identify a way that would maybe make it smoother. I can hit this template and it's going to give me a starting point. It's also going to allow me to adjust the details. So I can change the start and end dates to meet my needs. If there's something about my project that does require the micro intern to be on site, I can clarify that. But again, the default and encouraged option is remote. Most of our templated projects are scoped to take about 20 hours of work. Again, we recommend that the micro intern earn roughly $20 per estimated hour. So in this case, the micro intern would take home $400 for completing this project. The total cost per micro intern would be just under $445. Again, what that difference covers is Parker Dewey acting as the employer of record. Now, if they are trying to identify the right talent for something longer term, this is where they may decide to select multiple micro interns. So obviously, there is a cost associated with doing that, but what the employer is doing by using Parker Dewey in this way is allowing them to make a more informed hiring decision. We've seen that when employers use Parker Dewey to assess fit for a longer term role, it reduces turnover. So this is actually really cost effective when employers think about the impact. And for all of you, it's great too, because you go from one student who may or may not actually like that longer term role getting selected to now you have a student who has an experience with that employer and they can make a more informed decision about whether it's a fit for them. But you also have four other students who have gotten paid professional experience that can go on their resume. The employer can clarify if they're looking for specific skills, and this is where they decide who sees the opportunity. Now, if they leave this blank, that's how it shows up in that open to all section. But as we saw, most employers don't do that. Most employers will feature to specific schools based on either geography or existing recruiting relationships. And again, that's where you sharing this with your employers becomes really crucial to make sure they're consistent and relevant opportunities for your students. So if I wanted to feature this, this is my alma mater, so it's just kind of my go-to. I could feature it just to that institution. I could decide to feature to multiple schools in the Northeast Ohio area. So I can keep going for as many schools as I like, or I can limit to just one. That's up to me, the employer. Now, if I'm trying to create a pipeline for a traditional internship, I can limit this to current students only. If I'm trying to find talent that I could hire right away if they're a good fit for something full term, I can limit to recent graduates, or I can leave it open if it doesn't bother me one way or another. We love for employers to let us know if this is an audition for something longer term. And then this is where they can add some of those additional questions. Now, if they're using a template, we've already given some example questions that they might ask, but they can remove or change those. The only one they can't change is this "why do you think we should select you" question, because the answers are usually pretty telling. Now, when they hit post now, it's going to go to our team, and we're going to make sure there is a specific professional deliverable, that it can reasonably be completed within the estimated number of hours, and that the compensation is appropriate. Once those things are confirmed, then it becomes visible for students to see and apply. So just want to really hit home here why employers use Parker Dewey and what version of using it is going to have the most benefit, both for your employers and your students. We often have partners who have relationships with small businesses or nonprofits or local entrepreneurs. And if they have an appropriate project need, by all means, they're welcome to use Parker Dewey. They're likely to find benefit in it, using it to get stuff done. But that's not the method that's going to create the most value for your institution and your students. Where you're going to see the most impact is when this is really emphasized to employers who already have recruiting interest in your talent as a recruiting tool to help them accomplish what they are trying to do better. We see that there are really two sub goals that fall under that larger recruiting umbrella. Those employers who are trying to expand their talent pipelines. They want to reach students earlier. So when they're in their first and second year, they can make those important decisions about majors and what classes they're taking, knowing that that company and industry is an option. We also see employers who want to make more informed hiring decisions. They already have an identified opportunity, whether it's a traditional internship or a full-time role, but they want to make sure they're making the right hire when they make their selection, and they'll use micro-internships to assess those skills in a real and meaningful way. So just to give a few more examples of the different ways this can be done, for the folks that are building talent pipeline, I already emphasized, they can use this to engage talent earlier. First and second year students typically aren't ready for the traditional internship, but short projects focused on soft skills is a great way to build awareness with them early. We also see employers who will use this to build an intentional pipeline if they know a longer term opportunity is coming up yet. But for one reason or another, maybe they need to finish finalizing the budget or there's still some conversations. It's not something they can share at this moment, but they've got an opportunity to get in front of talent. The micro internship is a great way to build that talent pipeline. So when that longer term opportunity does become available, they're not scrambling to build a pool of talent. They already have folks who applied for this micro internship, perhaps one or more folks that have done the micro internship. So when the longer term role is ready, so is that recruiter, and they already have valuable insights about that candidate pool. We also see sometimes employers that have already made a fantastic connection with a student because of an internship. Maybe they had that student as an intern over the summer, but they aren't ready to extend full-time roles yet. But they want to make sure that when they are ready, that student is ready to accept. Often, students don't have time for traditional internships during the academic year, but they do have time for these flexible remote projects. So employers can use these micro internships as a strategy to keep those relationships warm and make sure their company is top of mind for their top pick talent. I see a question, can community college students benefit from these projects? Definitely. They tend to be in that category of employers wanting to engage talent earlier, although it does depend on the programs. We know that in many community colleges, students are graduating even from the community college with fantastic skills that could be applied to the workplace. So sometimes employers are using them for that, assessing skills for hire as well. But we'll often see, they're using this as a strategy to engage that talent earlier. So short answer is yes, community colleges can benefit. For building a talent pipeline, we also see sometimes folks will engage students as campus ambassadors. It's a way where they're building relationship with one particular student that could be a good fit for something longer term, but that student is also helping them build brand awareness with other folks at their institution. We also see folks that, again, are posting straightforward projects focused on soft skills, things that first or second year students, to the point of the question in the chat, or community college students are capable of doing. So they're reaching those students earlier. And this is a great way to build awareness and brand with students. We see in our post survey that more than half of the micro interns who have taken it reported that one of the outcomes was that they became more aware of a company they weren't previously familiar with. This is not so big a commitment that a lack of awareness about an employer gives students pause. They think, oh, well, it's a short-term opportunity. Who cares if this employer is someone I already know or not? It's a great experience for my resume. I'm looking to explore. And then what happens along the way is a lot of the times they realize, wow, this company would have never been on my radar before, but I actually really like the people here. And now I'm considering, is this somewhere that maybe I want to start my career? Now, for those who are looking to make a longer term hire, again, whether it's a traditional internship or a full-time role, I always like to emphasize that whatever job board you're using for your internships and your full-time roles, whether it be Simplicity, Handshake, 1220, or something else, Parker Dewey is not in competition with that. When a company comes to you and they say, I have a job, I have an internship, you're still going to whatever job board I'm sure you have paid a lot of money for. But where you can have Parker Dewey come into play is encouraging them that when they post that longer term opportunity to Handshake or to Simplicity or to wherever, say, have you considered in the application instructions having them apply for a micro internship? And what that does is a few things. One, it allows them to see, well, which students follow those instructions to actually go apply for this relevant micro internship. If an employer is struggling with an abundance of candidates, that helps them narrow it down. Two, for those that are good micro internship candidates and that they select, it allows them to see their skills in a real way. So they can make the decision about the longer term role based on real performance, while simultaneously giving the students or recent graduates who are being considered a chance to see, well, would I actually like this company or this longer term role? And there might be some of your students on Parker Dewey who see this specific project who might not have connected the dots when they saw the longer term role on Handshake. They see a job title, they may not necessarily know what that title does, but they see the relevant project on Parker Dewey, that light bulb could go off and go, oh, well, I didn't know that is what that title does. I'm just interested in this project. And now I know that this is an audition project for that longer term opportunity. Let me not only apply for the micro internship, but now that I know what that role does, let me apply for this longer term opportunity. So it's a win for everyone involved. And here's just some examples of how we can take a longer term role and identify relevant micro internships that employers can then use to assess fit. So let's say an employer wants to hire an entry-level data marketer. That person needs to know how to work with data. They need to have an awareness of content strategy. They need to be a good communicator, be able to provide recommendations, make sense of what they're seeing in the data. So that could be micro internships related to data cleanup and visualization. There could be a project related to contents performance reporting. There could be a campaign analysis. These are all projects that would help an employer assess whether a candidate is actually a good fit for their longer term role. And while they're getting to assess that in a real way, there are multiple students who are now getting insights into that type of role, that industry, and getting paid professional experience for their resume. Here's a great example from Smith & Nephew. They're a medical device company, and students often aren't in great need of medical devices. So they just weren't a company that were at the top of the radar for a lot of talent. They had a fantastic rotational program, but they were having trouble filling the roles for it. So that's where they came to Parker Dewey. They posted a micro internship that involved the candidates selecting one of their products and putting together a pitch deck for it. And they selected 12 micro interns for this project. Now, this was not only valuable as a project itself, it allowed them to get outside perspective about what these students and recent graduates saw as the value of their products, but even more important, it allowed the company to see how these micro interns tackled the project. Were they communicative with their supervisor? What types of points were they drawn to? What was their presentation style like? And as the result of seeing those skills in action, the company was able to say, about half of these micro interns would be fantastic additions to our program. So they extended 6 full-time offers. And out of those six, this company, who went from, we're having trouble filling these roles, went to 5 of the 6 accepting those longer-term offers. And even more exciting, a year after hire, all of them who had accepted those offers were still there. And that's something we see consistently when micro internships are used. The students are learning through the micro internship whether or not this is actually a good fit for them, so they get to make more informed hiring decisions. And for the employers, that is a huge win because turnover is super expensive. So this is a really cost-effective way for them to go about finding out who would be a good fit. And even for those 6 that didn't get full-time offers, again, they got paid professional experience for their resumes. And this is also really easy for employers to incorporate into their existing hiring strategies. I like to make it clear this is not asking employers to revamp everything they're doing or change what they're doing. It's something that's designed to help them do what they're already doing better. So if they want to drum up interest and encourage students to come to their table at the career fair, maybe highlight, hey, we have a micro internship we'll be offering to one student who visits our table. Come by to learn how to apply. If they made a great connection, but they don't have the longer term of opportunity available yet, micro internships give them immediate next step to continue to grow and make sure that they don't lose whatever momentum they built when they met that talent at your existing career fair. It's a great way, again, to make sure they're making the right hire. And if you have employers that are interested in your students, but we're just never going to make it to campus for one reason or another, this gives them a meaningful way they can still engage. And again, if you have those employers that maybe don't have longer term recruiting goals, but they do have an appropriate project, they're still welcome to use this to get on-demand project support. It's still paid professional experience for your students, even if it won't likely lead to something longer term. So they're welcome to use this to create more opportunities. We also see that this is a win for employers. Not only are they getting really valuable work done, but they're getting insights into those micro interns as candidates for something longer term. So again, just a win all around. It's also a great way for employers to reach some of those demographics we were talking about earlier. When we look at paid internships overall, less than a quarter, or barely more than a quarter, tend to go to students from historically underrepresented populations. And that just really is representative of the fact that even if an internship is paid, don't get me wrong, we love paid, we're all about paid, but even if it is, if a student doesn't have time, if they don't have transportation, if they don't have awareness of that company or that opportunity, it's not accessible to them in the same way that micro internships are because of the short-term nature, because of the fact that they're typically remote, and because of the flexibility. We see that over 80% of the candidates selected for micro internships come from historically underrepresented populations in the workplace. We already talked with that Smith and Nephew example a little bit about the cost, but when companies employ micro internships, there is significant savings, especially when you consider the reduced cost of not having as much turnover. And we see too, again, that recent graduates who've engaged in micro internships, less likely to turn over. That's part of what contributes to that cost savings. So again, just lots of wins for employers as well as students. So with our last 15 minutes, now that we've talked about the benefits for both the students and employers, I want to talk a little bit about our education partner options. As you see here, we have 3 options, including our basic level of partnership. With Basic, you get resources to help you share this with your students and your employers. So that's going to include landing pages. We have tons of marketing collateral. We also have support, particularly for employer engagement. Members of our team who are dedicated solely to supporting those employers introduced by our partner schools, and keeping in mind which schools introduce them as they're having conversations and helping them feature projects. This is particularly important because marketing shows that most people, it's not just employers or students, but most people need to hear about something between 5 and 7 times before it sinks in enough for them to take action. So a lot of our recommendations are to introduce employers to Parker Dewey and to our colleagues that support employer engagement so they can help you with those follow-up touch points. So that's not all resting on your shoulders. As mentioned, we've got lots of materials to make this easier in our marketing toolkit and partner checklists. And once partners at the basic level have completed their partner checklists, they can also request usage data. Once a year, again, after they've completed the partner checklist, which involves things like sharing with both students and employers in a variety of ways, that data is going to include which students have created accounts, when they created accounts, when they last logged in, how many projects they've applied for. If they've been selected, it will have the details of the micro-internships, the company, the project title, start date, end date, compensation. And both the micro-intern and the employer are highly encouraged to complete a feedback survey after the experience. If either have done so, then they will have those responses included in that data report as well. So that's basic in a nutshell. And again, basic is no cost. So at no cost, you get landing pages to share, the ability to complete those partner checklists. And once you've done that every year, if you've completed within the last 12 months, to know what impact has this had for my students. And I think I've covered this a few times through the course of the webinar, but I always want to make sure I'm being totally transparent and totally clear when it comes to the importance of employer engagement. Because most companies feature their projects to specific schools, we found that if partners are not consistently highlighting to their employers as a recruiting tool, it's going to help them make more informed hiring decisions and expand their pipelines, that their employers either may not be aware of Parker Dewey at all, or they may not recognize that your students are on it and may not think to feature opportunities to them. So just to really demonstrate that, we see two different schools in these columns, one in the green column, one in the kind of blue-gray column. And in the green column, we know that the school was sharing this with their employers. And we know this because we can see how many views the page was getting. There was fairly consistent traffic. We saw companies creating Parker Dewey accounts from that page. They were posting projects. Their students were getting selected. They were earning money. They were getting feedback. Then we had a school that we could tell wasn't sharing this with their employers at all. We know because their page wasn't getting any traffic. Nobody was creating accounts from their page. It's not impossible for students to get selected if the school is not sharing with their employers, but it is significantly less likely and not going to lead to the scale of success that we know you probably want for your students. I see the question, will career services be able to see which students from our school were hired for micro-internships and where? At the basic level that we were just covering, once a year after you've completed the partner checklist, you can request data, and that's going to let you know which of your students were selected and the details for the micro-internships. So the name of the company, the project title, start date, end date, compensation, and if either party left feedback, that will be included. Now, at our next option, we're going to talk about Parker Dewey Plus. You are able to see all that in real time. So just wrapping up that point about the importance of employer engagement, we give you lots of resources in the checklist. We've also had schools who have done a great job engaging alumni to create project opportunities, engaging their grant writing team to be able to do programs, something we'll talk about here in a minute. Some companies or some schools who have engaged their own students in micro-interns. So just really emphasizing that the school plays an important role in generating these opportunities as well. And everything you need to do it, from email templates to flyers to slides to incorporate into presentations, you're going to find these things in our partner checklists. And these are things we send you reminders about as well if you become a Parker Dewey partner. So moving ahead to the question that's relevant to Amy's question. Well, I guess this isn't a question, but relevant to Amy's question, Parker Dewey Plus partnership. This is the $2,000 a year subscription level. So this allows you to see everything that would be in that basic report and more, but on demand instead of submitting a request for data only once a year after completing the checklists. Now, I also really like to make clear that we still highly recommend, even if you're Parker Dewey Plus level, to do the checklists. A dashboard is only as valuable as the data that's in it, and if a school isn't consistently sharing this with both students and employers, you're going to be paying $2,000 a year for a dashboard that's not going to have a lot of data. So please use us, our templates, and our resources, even if you start at the Parker Dewey Plus level. In addition to those things you'd see at the basic level, you are also going to be able to see your students' profiles and applications. So if I was still in career services, a couple times this term, I would be logging in to see, do I have students who have applied for quite a few projects without being selected? And if so, I'd be checking their profile. Often it's really clear why they might be struggling, and it gives the school the chance to offer some proactive coaching and identify students who may be struggling before they graduate. It also includes the ability to see if any companies have created accounts from your employer-facing partner page. So you're aware of that interest. There's a history of any projects that have ever been featured specifically to your institution. And the $2,000 a year subscription includes hiring one of your own students as a Parker Dewey student ambassador. So that means a student in about an 18-hour project is going to be helping you spread the word about this platform. So that's not all resting on your shoulders. Just like any other micro-internship, they get paid for that effort. So about 360 of that $2,000 subscription goes into the pocket of that selected micro-intern. Already talked a little bit about some of the employer sides. Again, you can see if employers have created accounts from your page, a history of any projects featured to your students, and all of these reports are downloadable, so you can manipulate the data further, upload into other systems, which gives you really valuable insights and opportunities. Now, that third option, the Parker Dewey Program Partnership, the reason why it is so much more expensive than Plus is because a program involves the partner covering the cost for the employers. And when a partner does this, because they're footing the bill, they get to make all the rules. So they get to decide what size of projects they're going to cover, what types of employers qualify, if the projects have to be related to something specific, when the projects take place. So we've had some schools who have said, I'm going to cover the cost of projects just for alumni over winter break because I want opportunities for my students then. Other folks who have covered costs for local employers, others who have covered costs for nonprofits. My personal favorite and recommendation is when partners use this as a way to generate interest and a more consistent flow of micro-internships. So using this kind of as a trial for employers who do consistently recruit at their institution and say, hey, try these micro-internships. First one's on us. Allowing the employer to see the value and then hopefully fund their own projects in the future. And just in case you're a visual like me, this gives examples of what a program cost might look like. Usually programs start at about 10K. The majority of that, 8K, goes into the pockets of your students. It's paying them for their work on the micro-internship. There's a pretty minimal program management fee, but just emphasizing again, most of the cost of a program is paying the students. Now, there are a lot of different ways that folks can customize programs, so much so we could talk about them for a whole hour, and we do on a very regular basis. If you are interested in learning more about programs, we do have a webinar. Do not feel like you have to wait until November. The recording and slides from the last session are always available. And I see that some of you have already jumped on the poll, asking about what types of things are interesting to you moving forward. If you are interested in discussing program options, or maybe you're aware of a line of funding or just want to talk about this further, let us know by hitting that Identify Opportunities to Fund Micro-Internships option. We also have regularly scheduled events. You're at one right now. Obviously, this is our one for current and prospective partners, but we also have monthly webinars for students and recent graduates. For employers and for students, we also have monthly office hours. If you want to hear more about how we present this to those specific audiences, as opposed to this presentation, where we're talking about the benefits, a little bit about both of the other experiences, but really in the context of how it helps you, the education partners, please don't hesitate to register for any of these. You will get these slides and the recording after today's presentation, and these links are live. So you can click on them if you want to join in or if you want to register for any of these events. So, in terms of next steps, I know I covered a lot of information today, but really what it comes down to is what are your goals at your institution? Are you having students who need help getting experience? Do you need to create more opportunities for your students? Do you need something that you can offer employers who are coming to you with recruiting challenges? Think about what's going on with your campus and think about your goals and where we can fit in based on the information shared today. Or if you think you have an idea, but you're like, I'm not sure if that really lines up with what that lady was talking about, schedule a meeting. We're always happy to talk through it, and my meeting link is going to be in the follow-up. If you're not already a Parker Dewey partner, consider establishing a partnership. It's going to give you pages that'll make it easy for you to share this resource with both students and employers, as well as lots of resources and support from our team, again, with the goal of making it easy. And once you have those resources, share them. Share them widely, share them consistently, and think critically about what conversations are relevant. It's probably going to be a lot more than you might have initially thought. Basically, if an employer has an interest in recruiting your students, you should be highlighting this as a way to help them do that better. If a student is looking for a way to get a foot in the door and start building experience, this is a great way to do it. So it's probably going to fit into an awful lot of your conversations. If you haven't already, would love for you to fill out that final poll. Let us know what you're interested in based on today's conversation. If you have any other questions, I'll hang around for another couple minutes. But as we wait for those, just want to say thank you so much for your time today. I hope this was helpful and looking forward to either building or strengthening partnerships with the folks in the room.